How are we doing? Yeah. How are we? How are we doing? And then, oh my goodness. Welcome to today's episode, anyways. Okay, so on for today, we'll be looking at A Thousand Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. While I was, oh my goodness, come to think of it, I think every time I want to start or go or start my intro, I go with this while I think when I was, to be honest, I don't prepare it like that, but let's just say it's my emo for now until we find something better. But anyways, mm, while I was thinking about how to structure this or that, oh, what book am I deciding, and I decided that let's talk about A Thousand Splendid Suns today. I just remembered how I came into, or how I wouldn't even call it stumble, or how I came to know about Khalid. Thank God for Book Talk. Book Talk, for once, in all of their weird, odd, and recommendations, I found out about Khalid on Book Talk. No, Bookstagram. Sorry, on Bookstagram. This book community on Instagram. So it's called Bookstagram, and I'll see these quotes lines that were written in some of his books, and all of those, and they will hit home in such way, and I'll be like, wow, how can a writer come up with such words and writings in a book? And I hadn't even read any of his book as at this time, but I came across it a lot, because almost every time I am scrolling or just going through that particular the book explore page, but mainly majorly about books and all of those, like in 6 out of 10 pages, it's always most times a book that's written or was written by Khalid. And I really got interested. And maybe I just was like, I just want to find the lore of this writer and of his books. That almost every time, everywhere I look on Instagram or Bookstagram, is always there. That was how I found out about his books or his writings. And the first of his books that I read was The Kite Runner. Ah, I'm still going to talk about Kite now, but because A Thousand Splendid Suns is my most recent read, and that's why I'm going with this first. I'll give it a read, and maybe sometime one of those days I'll talk about it. That was how I found out about Khalid, and I read. When I was done reading the Kite Runner, it became one of my life's mission to read every book he's ever written. I think he's written three, but last time I checked, when I was looking to just to get updated if there's been any book that he has written, I think he wrote one more. He wrote another one, not so recent, but quite recent, sure. And four in total, I think, that he's written altogether. And I'm proud to say that I've read three out of those four. It's just that his books are quite scarce in the Nigerian market, especially the physical books. I'm not sure about ebook, but getting the physical book is quite scarce. It took me almost 6 months or almost a year thereabout to get A Thousand Splendid Suns after I found the Kite Runner. So they are very, very scarce, and quite expensive, above the normal expensive average. But altogether, I feel like there is a need for me to talk about Khalid from my own perspective as an author, even if it's a little bit. You know, for I s- from my perspective, or for me, Khalid reminds me of those old African literatures that we read while we were, let's say, junior secondary school, primary school. No, not for anything much, like not for anything much in particular, but because of the storytelling. Then before we had grown up now, and there is a modernization, or should I say a more aesthetically, should I call it pleasing, a more aesthetically pleasing names. Then they were just storybooks. That was what we called them then. Be it those literatures and all of those, we just call them storybooks because that was exactly what they were doing. They were just telling us stories in they were just retelling stories the way they would have told it to you, while if you were sitting with them or if you were looking at them. That's what I get when I read books written by Khalid. Khalid is not in, I wouldn't call him a novel, I'll just call him a storyteller. That is that is how, you know, that's his main genre, to be honest. Just storytelling. It reminds me, takes me back. There's a feeling of nostalgia when I read Khalid's book, aside of other emotions his book evokes inside of you. But basically, the first thing when you start reading Khalid's book is storytelling, is his heart. It's storytelling, the art of the way he writes stories. That is, and he writes those stories in such vividly, in such expressively vivid terms or manner that you will feel like you are sitting down while he's narrating a story, or expressing that story. You will find yourself in the middle of of the place where the story is taking place. That is what me I get. And I dare say a lot of his readers feel that same way too. Because when I read some of the reviews, on his books, I get that instance. Probably not the same. They don't put it down in the same manner verbatim, but that is what I feel like get when I read those reviews. It's like you're sitting down and this man is telling you a story, and he commands your full and total concentration, because there's just not there, you have no other choice. And there are emotions that while you're reading a story brings out of you, and you're just thinking in your mind that, wow, I can't believe I feel this way. you know when you explore some themes behind, or that in the books, whatever or whichever one of his books you read, you can almost, in fact, you can feel some of those things, be it loneliness, be it sadness, be it grief. You can almost feel the things those characters are feeling while you're reading, but not in such negative manner, but in such, I don't know, I'm at loss for words to explain or to just encapsulate how his books make me feel. And personally, I can't imagine, or I would love to I try to imagine how it would be like just carrying on a conversation with him. Not necessarily a bookish conversation. It could just be any conversation, and I want to imagine, I try to imagine how that would go. Just sitting down, just speaking to him about random, or just random topic, or just anything in particular. Is going to be such, there is no words, there really isn't any words. I feel like if I go on and on, I'm not even talking about his books, so just about, I haven't really I don't know much about his personal life, but just having read about it and how he writes, there's just I don't know. I don't There just no word comes to mind, or there is no words that feel good enough to totally express them. I think I've spoken in much enough about him. Then, if at first things first, there's so many themes to explore in this book. I feel like so many themes that you could find, or you could explore, or that just one of the things, or one of the themes that I first should I say came across while from the early chapters is betrayal. love, motherhood, betrayal, motherhood, womanhood, pain, endurance, loneliness, grief, history. Then we've got the wars, factional wars, anarchy, extremism, loyalty, friendship, and the impact of those wars on people, civilians, especially mainly women. And all of those are the things that we'll be exploring as we go by, or as we walk through this, through the book, or for those that have read it, or those that are about to or will read it. That those are the things that you find when you read the book. The book is divided into, I think we had two main character, that's Miriam and Laila. But the book was like, no, I won't call it divided, but the book was in two parts, but later merged towards the middle. Or I wouldn't say the end, but at the middle they merged into one. We were first introduced into. Oh yeah, I should have mentioned it, that this might be a spoiler for someone who hasn't read the book. There might be some spoilers, or so just to take note. Okay, as I was saying, we were first introduced into Miriam's story, then Lila's. So we first started with Miriam's story, then there was a stop, and for a while we didn't know what went on with Miriam. And then we were brought into, we were introduced to Lila and her story. Then at the middle, towards going to the end, their story merged, and it became one. One of the themes why that I explored, or that I found in this book, was the very, very, very first theme. And in fact, I think that's the major thing: betrayal and motherhood. In Miriam's first, in the first part of the story, that was Miriam's story, was betrayal and motherhood. Betrayal, motherhood, and womanhood. First betrayal that First betrayal was Jalil's betrayal of Nana, and Jalil's betrayal of Nana. And if you read the book, at some point when I started reading the book, I really hated, not really hated, but I despised her character. From the beginning, I kind of despised her character. Then later, I think after I was done with Miriam's story, at least, or I took a break, and I thought about it. I think I just kept is reminiscing the word, but I just kept giving it a go over, and I realized that Miriam was a mother. Yeah, obviously she is Miriam's mother, but you could see how she tried. She really tried, and tried, should I say tried, protected rather, Miriam, and should I say prepared her in a way to see should I say man, not just her father's, but man's betrayal, of a way a man will betray you in so many, like it was like, all those meanness, a little bit harshness. To me, it ended up looking like that it was just in a subtle way, maybe not so subtle, but that was what I saw it as, like trying to, should I say, prepare her, or just open her eyes, should I say, the main nature of men in that book's context, please, in that book's context, like, because if anything, that was what she had gone through all her life. Feel that most people, whenever they give advice, whenever they act out, whenever they talk, or not just most people, everyone self in general, people's attitude, people's habits, people's talking, people's opinions and ideas is deeply shaped by their experiences, what they've experienced probably from childhood, teenagehood, adulthood, and through life in general. You know, our habits, our behaviors, our thoughts, they are shaped by our environment, what we've experienced, our home, and all of those things. And that was what That was, I believe, because from looking at Nana's, the little that we knew about Nana's life altogether in that book, you could see that that was majorly what the habit she kept portraying, to Nana, that might look to an outsider as being harsh or mean, or to the reader anyways, is just Nana being protective of Miriam in a way, and trying for her not to be, should I say, so naive, so much so that a man takes advantage of her. You know, Jalil took advantage of her, impregnated her, denied her, and ended up making Miriam and Arami, a bastard that wasn't loved. And Jalil's betrayal of Nana was the first, I think, was the first thing I saw in all of that man, was the first thing I saw, should I say, that even hurt me in a way, that touched me in a way. And she was just a woman scorned. And even then, even while people believe that women are so complicated, at least that's the belief a lot of men or people, or even some women believe. But when you look at it, women are not so complicated, to be honest, because upon all the betrayal that Nana had suffered in the hands of Jalil, the shame and the humiliation, somewhere in Miriam's narration in the book, we saw how Nana would prepare herself, would compose herself. I think in once in a month, I can't even remember some details, specific details, because it's been I think 2 or 3 months ago that I read this book. And that how she would be in such readiness, clean the house, prepare herself, dye her fingernails, just in preparation for Jalil's arrival, and you could see that in spite of the pain and hurt, in spite of the anger and meanness Nana masked, as that she used to mask her anger and her fear and and humiliation that she had suffered, her pain, all of that was still based or founded on the love she had for Jalil. And you could see how, in spite of all of those negative emotions that a woman, that was Nana, that she had, you could see love. I don't know. I hope I'm saying this right. You could just still see love. And I just felt so heartbroken for her. I just felt so heartbroken for her. He reminded me of the time I came to the knowledge, a personal knowledge, understanding that to just be, should I say, more lenient, or that I started thinking in my mind that we daughters or children should be more lenient with our mothers, especially our parents, but most especially our mothers. That for some of us that had such strict parents, disciplined parents, that it seemed like they hated us while we were younger, and especially for firstborns, for the first children, and you see your parents being less, as time goes on, they became less strict and became more flexible, and you are so hurt. And sometimes you have questions that why weren't you this flexible? Why weren't you this, less mean and less strict or less disciplined with me? And you come to realize as you grow older, that they too, it was what they knew, or it was their first time being parents, being mothers, being fathers, being exclusively responsible for a whole human being's life. And it just helps you to be more compassionate, not necessarily overlook or throw away some of the things that they did that really was bad, but it just helps you to be more compassionate and just be more understanding and less angry of those actions. That was how I felt with Nana, at least after reading that first part, was that I just felt so heartbroken. I felt so heartbroken for her. And especially when she killed her, that part was, for some hours I couldn't go back to the book. When Miriam went looking for her father, and she ended up sleeping outside Jalil's house because Jalil refused to let her in or refused to see her. And Miriam, in her childlike naivety, thinking that, oh, maybe he will still come out and just come to see her. And by the time she got back, to her place, Nana had killed herself. You know, Nana was a woman who had been scorned, and believe it or not, Miriam was all that she had. When she kept telling Miriam, when we were reading it, and she first kept telling Miriam that if Miriam left her, she would die, she would die, she would die. We all thought it was just Nana in her, in an abrasive nature, but not knowing that she literally meant that she really was gonna die if Miriam left, or if she's not with Miriam. And you can see the strange and odd but strongly unbreakable bond between mother and child, because at that moment, at that point, Miriam was the only person that Nana had not betrayed her, or was the only gift that came out of all that betrayal, humiliation, embarrassment that she suffered, not just in the hands of Jalil, but in the hands of his other wives and their children. And it broke me so much. You would think that it was something that happened in reality. I felt Nana's heartbrokenness. Like I could. It was like I'm not even joking. Like I felt it almost literally. It just, that sadness and grief that Nana had, it just enveloped me while I was reading it. I just felt so heartbroken, and the guilt that Miriam had after. I felt like I wished I could just wrap Miriam in my arms and just hug her and pat her and just tell her that it wasn't her fault. And it makes you realize that sometimes you could protect. Nana tried so hard. I know some people might not see it from that perspective, but Nana tried so very hard to to um to protect. She tried so hard to protect Miriam, to just protect her, in a, should I even say, in a rather, in fact, if anything, what's the word, in a more, in an attack manner rather than defense. Some people, while they are protecting you, they will shun you, you won't see some things. But Nana kept emphasizing, kept saying, men are this, men are that, they will betray you. She was like, she should be careful that in the world, that everywhere that the man's accusing is a compass, a man's accusing and is a compass, and that it keeps pointing to women at all times. These quotes, and they seemed like quotes, but they were true. And she still, there was still an, or should I say, a bubble of protection around Miriam. And when she died, when she killed herself, it was so awful, and that aura of protection. And it makes you think that sometimes you just have to let some people experience some things, because there is no amount of protection you can try to protect someone. Sometimes if they don't experience it, or if they don't go through, even if it's just a little, they will never understand what you are trying to shield them from, or what you, even if you are not trying, what you want to shield them from. Sometimes experience is just the best way to teach someone that this that I'm telling you, it's really not, it's dangerous, it will hurt you. I remember I saw a video about a toddler that kept going back to the light, to fire. The mother had beat her times, just tap her, leave there, carry that away, don't go there. It's going, and the toddler kept going over and over and over again, until the mother just left her to touch. She didn't even touch the fire. It was just, a little, and you needed to see how this toddler ran away. And life is sometimes like that. You just have to let people experience some things for them to really know what what things are, because no matter how much you try to shield or protect them, you will always look like the bad person, or the one that doesn't want them to, doesn't want them to do this. That was how Miriam saw Nana. Miriam saw Nana as, this shrewd, angry woman that didn't want her to, that was shielding her from her father, or that was bad mouthing her father to her, or that was making her father seem like a really shrewd or wicked person. Not until she experienced him, not just when she went to see Jalil, at his house, but even after Nana had died, and she had to move to Jalil's place, and Jalil allowed himself to be should I even say manipulated by his wife, till he sold out, till he sold out his daughter and just gave her. I might believe he sold her out, to be honest. He did give her out in marriage, but he was a rich man, so he didn't necessarily need anything from that marriage, from that union. So I believe he just said, like, let me just sell this girl. I'll just get rid of her. Jalil is the worst type of man anyone should ever meet in one's life. Is you are rather, I think you are better off being single as a woman, better off fatherless. You are better off without male companions or friends than having someone like Jalil, be it as a father, as an husband, or even as a friend. He was spineless. His negligence and his negligence equated to wickedness to me. His negligence equated to wickedness to me, and I believe that he suffered for it at the later chapters in the book, because he was everything a man or a human being self, not just a man, shouldn't be in this life. He was everything someone should not be in this life. Jalil was spineless, he was a coward, he was wicked, he was a traitor. He hurt so much. He hurt so much. So one of that was the first thing, the betrayal of Jalil at Nana, Miriam, and ah that first part, it was so heartbreaking. He was just grief. All I felt in those first chapters were just grief. Grief for Miriam, grief for Nana, grief for all that they had gone through, just all of those things. And then from then on, we saw from then on we saw how Jalil and majorly his wives, to be honest, how his wives married Miriam off to Rashid. Then there was a pause. Then we were introduced to Leila. Lila's story is actually another beautiful one. Another beauty. Every story there is just bittersweet. We came across Laila and her father. Irony of Leila having a better father and an unavailable mother than Miriam having, should I say, an almost available mother, a better, I wouldn't call her a better mother, but having a mother that was there regardless, and an unavailable father. It's just so ironical. Leila and Tariq's story. One of the major theme, or one of the first thing that resonated with me in the second part, that's Leila's story, has to be grief, be it Mommy's loss of her sons, that's Ahmad and Noah, and Barbie's loss of Mommy in a way. You could, and love. Yeah. And first thing, let me first talk about Barbie and Mommy's love. You could see how a man could love his wife so much. You could see how dependent as a being, as a person, Barbie was on Mommy. And you could see the extent of the love they had for each other, even though at some point Mommy's love for Barbie got overshadowed by the grief she had for Ahmad, and for the by the grief of, the loss of Ahmad and Noah. And you could see, and the love that Barbie had for Layla. That you could see the relationship, the friendship, the intensity of those emotions, of those feelings, between Barbie and Layla. How we wanted for her to get an education, how we fought and strove hard, even after it couldn't work, how we kept teaching her, should I say homeschooling her. And for me, he compensated, although, since I'm not Leila and I'm not in the story, but for me as a reader, he compensated for Mami's unavailability and her negligence towards Leila. If you look at Miriam had love, but she had a type of tough love from Nana. And from Nana, I feel like it was one of the things that made her seek out Jalil, because the once in a while that Jalil will come, Jalil will buy her toys, though non-authenticated or just scraps, but that little, that little was more than enough for her, especially from the lens of a child. When you look at it from the lens of a child, that, oh, he tells me stories, he buys me toys, unlike the tough love that Nana had. But with Layla had soft love. She had the type of love that any child would crave for from a parent, from Barbie. Although she craved for Mommy's own too, she craved so much. She tried to work hard. She tried to work hard for her love, but she just was not there. Grief had sunken its deep into her, so much so that she neglected her. But one thing that compensated for it was Barbie's love, his attention, and his dedication to her. So I think in later part of the chapter, when we see her confidence while she was standing up to Rashid, how she was a woman, even in that situation that they were in the middle of war and all of that, unlike timid Miriam, is shaping Layla in a way that it made her have confidence that even Rashid's bullying was, well, the way Rashid bullied her, or the way Rashid acted towards her, was little in comparison to how he had broken, Miriam's spirit. And but also the love that she shared, and the friendship and loyalty she had with Tariq. Oh my goodness. Those childlike love, that innocent first love. I love the way when you are reading about childhood love or childlike love, when you read about them in some stories, it gives cringe, or sometimes even almost disgusting in a way. Disgusting might not be the word, but it comes close. But with the way Khalid wrote the love between Layla and Tariq, you just cannot help but just look at it from, even as an adult, but just even crave it. You cannot but crave it even as an adult. Oh, it's just a childhood friendship, but even as an adult, you cannot but crave that kind of dedication, loyalty, friendship, all masked, all encapsulated under love between Layla and Tariq, so much so that it transcends over time, distance, war. In their later chapters, we in Layla, in that part of Layla's story, we found so many people that, Mommy Barbie losing Mommy at first, Mommy losing Ahmad rather, and Noor, Miriam's loss of her pregnancies, Barbie's loss also of the boys. Barbie also felt grief. He felt grief, although not in the measure that Mommy felt it. And it goes to show how we grieve in different ways, how we grieve in different ways and different manner. But I loved how Barbie didn't let his grief overshadow him so much so that you know Layla became castaway or became alone. Because if he had been like main mommy, I can't imagine how Layla would have been or how she might have felt, considering the fact that she was even about to lose the both of them anyways. But at least she had full love, she had the love of mommy for a while before her sons went, before they were drafted for war. And until then she also, after that time when mommy lost all, she lost all reason for living and all reason for being alive, Barbie was there to fill in. If she still felt her absence, but Barbie was there to, should I say, to take up that role. And even though I'm a stranger in this story, or I'm just an outsider looking from the window, if I felt compensated and a bit relieved for Leila, because I couldn't imagine having being denied love both from mother and father. It just felt too much for a child at that age to ever bear. And even the love she had from Tariq's parents too, that I feel like all of those does not fully compensate, but they stood there in spite of mommy's negligence and absence in Layla's life. And towards the end, I came to really hate mommy, because when the war started, Barbie was really intent on leaving Kabul. But because mommy would refuse to leave, and that goes to show how sometimes how love can be so powerful yet be a sword. When you are so in love and so you love someone so much, so dependently, from for any outsider, for a stranger, I kept, while I was reading the book, I was so mad. Barbie, take Layla and leave. People should leave. You still have the window of opportunity of leaving the war. Everyone, people kept dying. They were just, narrowly escaping death over and over again. And they Layla wanted, Tariq had gone. Tariq, that was Layla's lifeline, had already left. And with the hope that they would see each other sometime. And Barbie, they were the only one of the few families left. And it wasn't like they didn't want to go, but mommy refused to leave, only because she was stubborn and had such she was so weighed down with grief and love for her children that she refused after she had learnt of their death. And because of fact all those wars, the intricacies and complications of war, she still refused to leave. I felt so heartbroken when she finally accepted for them to leave. And they ended up being casualties of war. I almost cried. As a book reader, I've come to toughen up, or to get toughened up, because I read, like I said, I've mentioned here times and times over, that I read different type of books. And there are some books that are so emotional, and some they are so thrilling, and some it's not even emotional per se, it's just the goriness of the things that you are reading, and you cannot just help but that, wow, these authors are drawing inspiration from reality. Things like this do happen. And I've come to toughen up when reading books. I allow myself feel whatever emotions but that I'm feeling, but I try hard not to cry over them. And because I'm a deeply emotional person, if I get into that state of emotion, sometimes it might be hard to get out. So I've over the years I've tried to learn to let myself feel the things I feel when I'm reading a book. And when I'm done from that world, I try very hard to detach from that world, and don't let and try not to take it with me into reality or into my day-to-day realistic life. But when this happened, I almost when Nana committed suicide, and this particular one, I almost cried. I almost cried because it felt so devastating. Like, after finally convincing mommy that, oh yes, she was ready to leave, eventually being taken down by that war. So, that was the end. We had that was the closing part of the second story. And in between, I think we've explored and betrayed some themes like betrayal, love, motherhood. I think fatherhood too. Yes, fatherhood. We explored fatherhood between Barbie and Layla. Between Barbie and Layla. And we explored grief. We explored grief and loss. Grief, loss, and background theme, not so background. I mean, it was the one, it shaped the life of each and every character in that book. But it was not all up in our face, so much so that it overshadows, even overshadows the rest of the of other story. But you could tell what when you pick anything, when you pick up this book, the genre, whether you're reading the blog or someone is talking to you about it, the major genre, it's an historical war fiction. The themes of war, fractional war, extremism, anarchy, that the major political themes there. That the major political themes there. Although it doesn't overshadow the lives and the characters of others, but it is what shaping their life. It's shaping their experiences over the course of the book. But I like that he didn't overshadow it, but still we still know that, yeah, it is the elephant in the room. And we were taking through three throughout the whole book. We were taking through three different war, or should I say war times, from the Soviet Union to the civil war and the Taliban's rule. When Russia was granting them, when Russia was granting the aid, be guns, financial help to the communist rule. And after the Soviet Union, after they had left, when they left the scene, I think that was what should I say, pushed mommy, after the exit of the Soviet Union, after their exit from the war. That was what pushed her to finally decide that, oh yes, let's leave. Then we have the civil war, the Mujahideen. I hope I'm pronouncing it well. That was the fractional war between different groups. With different groups. That was the civil war. At first, during the Soviet Union, during the Soviet invasion rather, it wasn't so, should I say, it was bad. There was unrest. The ordinary man felt it. There was just typical unrest, hunger, and all of those. Then when it became the civil war, it got worse. Depletion of houses, and a lot of all of those war. It just breaks my heart. War breaks my heart. But books that entail war, they tell the most bittersweet stories. They tell the most bittersweet stories. And then we ended up into the Taliban rule. And we saw the most devastating way an human being can ever be treated, or never should be treated. And you saw how they impeded on human self, not woman, yeah, human rights, women's rights. How they instigated so many rules, stifling rules. And it was just so heartbreaking how women couldn't work. They didn't allow women to work. They didn't allow them to go out without their bukabis. They couldn't rather, should I say, they couldn't go out without the presence, a man's presence, over and over and over and over again. And although beyond the book, beyond this book, you could later see when the Americans, when USA came into, I think, came into play. If you read about their history or just go through it, you see how for almost 20 years the Americans came to combat the Taliban's rule. And I think it was a bit better. It was a bit better, just a little bit. But for over 5 years, I think since 2020 or 2021 or thereabouts, I should have, I can't really remember, but I think since 2020 or 2021, after the exit of, the Americans, and it's been back to strict, to majorly the Taliban's, it's been majorly the Taliban's rule. And aside all of these things, all of these other things, or all of this story um that um that we've learned, or that we've read, or we've come to understand from this book, I love the way Khalid has taken us through history. It's like talking about history without talking about it. He has taken us through the Soviet Union, the Civil War, and the beginning, and when Taliban started to rule. And he's not even so subtle, but he doesn't overshadow every other story there, but you cannot help but learn. In fact, I think I've always heard about the Taliban, and since it wasn't really a topic I was so interested in, I never really, should I say, put in so much effort to learn about it or to know about it. But I just had a vague understanding of what the Taliban was, their rule in Afghan, in Kabul. But when I first read the Kite Runner, I had an inkling or an idea. And but even with the Kite Runner self, you get a Khalid, in the, maybe when we talk about it, but like, in the Kite Runner, it gives us two instances: time before the Taliban rule and after, and how life was before the rule and how life became after the rule. The same thing we get here in the Thousand Splendid Suns is that I love the way it shows us life, because anyone who reads the news now, especially someone who has never been there, who doesn't know anyone there, maybe are just continent away from Afghan, and we are just reading most of the things you see from the news, from journals, from newspapers. You would just keep imagining that, were there times where they lived peaceful, or where things were okay, or where things were good. And with stories that Khalid rather, that he writes, you see it shows us moments and times of peace, of tranquility, of mundane, of the ordinary, when life was just life, and they had not come into this regime of this rigid, stifling, human rights impending regime, right? And I think that's one of the things I love the most about not just Khalid's book, but every other war fiction, genre book. One particular book that I think eh, that whenever I read Khalid's book, or whenever I remember these books, that it feels like they are almost the same, or they come close in comparison, is the book Thief by Mark. But this one is Germany, the Nazi Germany. One of these days too, I feel I will talk about it. In fact, there is a need for me to talk about it, but I digress. So that's one of the beauty, or should I say, the things that about I loved about the Thousand Splendid Suns. I remember, I think in the first episode, I mentioned that not just escapism, or the stories you read in books, but there's a that I talked about the wealth of knowledge that you get from reading books. I don't think there is every thing that I've read after I read some of Khalid's book, just to enlighten me about some of the wars or how the wars are shifted over time in Kabul, Afghan. I had the foundation from be it the Kite Runner and A Thousand Splendid Sun and The Mountains Echoed. That's the name of his third book, and The Mountains Echoed. I learned them from every of his book that I have read, and in fact, realistic and less scary manner. Because when you read, you read the news, you check on Wikipedia, you just read something and they are very scary, or the experiences they go through or what they experience, they are indeed scary. But when you read them, there's a way it cushions it. I don't know how to really put it, but when you read them from the eyes and from the lens of someone who had experienced it, who was born there, who is, should I say, a native of that place, why in a way, or it just puts you at the center. And and it helps you not just to read it as an outsider, or as someone that, as an empath of all that, as someone who is empathetic towards all that they are suffering, especially if you are living in developed countries that, you don't suffer wars and all of that. Not just It helps you to understand the reality of not just the impact in times past, but the impact that is still having right now, the impact that it has had, the impact that it had is having right now, and of what might even happen in times to come. So that was what I learned, or should I say I garnered from the teams, from the political teams aspect, from the political team, the war and all of those. We saw about the Soviet invasion, the fractional wars, the civil war between different groups, between different Islamic groups in Kabul. Then we learned about anarchy, then extremism by the Taliban, and the impact on the ad on women. So that's I just wanted to, should I say, talk about or explore that a little bit. Then when we now enter into the last part, into the last aspect of the book, we enter into the concluding aspect. This is where Leila and Miriam's story, this is where that story emerge. So now, if you remember at the first, when Miriam was married off to Rashid, and they ended up coming back. I've forgotten where the town where Miriam was, but they ended up coming back to Kabul. Miriam, had series of miscarriages. She kept losing her children. I think she got to a point where she hit menopause. She married Rashid at the age of 15, and I think Rashid was maybe 60 or thereabout at that age. And now she suffered violence in the hands of Rashid. And anyone who, if you read Miriam's story after she got married, when you are reading it, she will come off, in fact she does come off as, a weak woman, someone who is timid, or whose light has been beaten out of her. But you can see her quiet acts of rebellion, because our upbringing was different, our experiences were different. Unlike Leila, that had the strong father figure that was able to build that, she was literate. She had a strong father figure that not only was she literate, but she was knowledgeable. At the beginning, you will see the ruffle between Leila and Miriam, and how Miriam felt so insecure. And she felt like her position was taken. Leila really tried hard at the beginning. For Miriam to warm up to her. But from looking at Miriam's perspective, you can actually, in fact, I feel like her attitude or her responses to Layla were expected. They were what you would expect from someone who had gone through or who had um Miriam's type of experiences. And in a way, you could see Rashid. I feel like I should call it fearful of Layla in a way, because he could see how strong-willed, be it at heart, in her mind, and in her sense, you could see how strong-willed Layla was, even in the midst of all of those war, in the midst of that situation as at that time. I loved as someone who, I won't call myself shy, but as someone who doesn't thrive with, I'm a very quiet person, in literally and figuratively, and I'm someone who thrives in quiet. And to be honest, it took a lot of time for me to build myself, my esteem, my confidence. I relate so well with Miriam, and people like Layla are people that I look at that, wow, oh, they are so confident, they are so bold, they speak their heart and their mind. But with people like Miriam are people like Layla will look at and see as weak, as weak, as not having a bone, being timid. But in later times, you will realize that you will see how Miriam rose up, you know, in quiet rebellion, in quiet courage, and she became who everyone would have expected her to have been from the beginning. And I loved how Leila and Miriam's relationship transcended from sister wives to mother and daughter, even grandmother. When grandmother, transcending from sister wives to mother and daughter, and eventually a grandmother to Aziza and Zelmai. I hope I'm pronouncing the name well enough, the Arabic names. The love between Aziza and Miriam. Well, I feel that was a redemption in a way. I loved how gave Miriam, having lost children, having miscarried all her children over the years that she had been with Rashid. If she had had kids, maybe her life, the life of horror that she lived with Rashid might have been bearable, and less lonely. But I loved how towards that end, how Khalid gave her a source of comfort through Aziza. At some point sef, you would be almost think that Miriam was the one who gave birth to Aziza, or that Aziza was Miriam's biological child, because you could see their love and their bond even beyond what she had with Leila. And I loved how I loved it sef, not just like, I loved it how Leila didn't, after they had gotten through, their first phase of awkwardness, of hate for each other, how Leila l- allowed that bond between Aziza and Miriam. It was like Miriam was the mother of Aziza, and Leila just left it. She let it be, she allowed it. I feel like if that had happened between her and Zan, little bit spoiled child, that it might not, that's rubbish boy, might not have been as spoiled as it was. And I loved how oftentimes, Leila stood up for Miriam before Rashid. There were times it was after he married Leila, when he got married, after he got married to Leila, that all the beatings and all the over harshness and the bullying on Miriam reduced, because of it. That emphasize also the need for, as a woman to be bold, to stand your ground, to be knowledgeable, because not only did he help Leila, he also helped Miriam as well, because that strength that Leila had, he transcended into Miriam as well. And in a way, in a joint manner, they were able to scare off Rashid to some point. They were able to scare off Rashid to some point. I feel like if I should say each and every, every story, line by line, word for word of how I understood this, we probably won't live here. So in conclusion, a lot of things went down. How Aziza, how they had, when the war got so bad, the Taliban rule got so bad, and Rashid lost his shop. How Rashid never really Rashid never really liked Aziza, and because she was a female and wanted a male child instead, and how happy he got when he had his male child, how he spoiled his male child, and Aziza was thrown away to the background, how they had to take Aziza to the orphanage just so they could be able to feed. And there were a lot of stories that went on there. In the final part, we see Tariq coming back for Layla, and Rashid getting to know about it, how he was beating Layla and Miriam, and after he beat them, and how they tried to escape from Kabul, how he backfired Oh, yeah, it was before they tried to run away. Yeah, it was before Tariq came back that they tried my head. But we see how Layla and Miriam, how they tried to run away, how it backfired, how the officer had ended up bringing them back home, and Rashid beat them black and blue. How Miriam took up the beating and took up the blame. That was one of the parts where a quiet rebellion came into play. How she took up the blame, took up most of the beating, and how he threatened to kill them. I don't even want to talk about that useless Rashid of a man. I feel like if I talk about him, I won't stop talking. I will not stop talking. Then we see Tariq coming back, and we see how that bratty son of ours, how he told Rashid about it, how he beat them up, and in the process they ended up killing Rashid, because if they didn't kill him, actually he would have killed them. And that was the most heroic. Every other thing pales in comparison. Every other story, every other angle of the story pales in comparison to how Miriam killed Rashid. I think that symbolizes, in a way, for me sef, I feel it symbolizes redemption. In a way, it symbolizes redemption and freedom. For me, as at least from for me, in my own perspective, it symbolizes redemption, it symbolizes freedom, and it was right. I liked that it wasn't maybe Layla that mistakenly ended up killing Rashid, that it was Miriam, because I believe that it was her right, because of all that she had suffered in his hands, all that she had gone through. And there was and in fact, there's not a probability. If they hadn't mistakenly killed Rashid, he would have killed them, killed Layla, killed Miriam, and Aziza too. He would have killed the three of them and left only that his bratty son. But and after that had happened, that they had accidentally killed him, Layla was scared, she was in fear. But I loved at that part. We had read the book from the beginning and all of those, and Miriam had come across to us as weak, timid, or shy, introverted, like the light has been taken out of her. But I love that at the end she became brave and courageous. She became the mother that Layla never had, became the grandmother that Aziza had, and who she was to Aziza. She became a shield and a protector, that no, we will bury him and I will take all the blame. She made Layla didn't want to leave Mariam behind, but Mariam insisted, that Layla left herself and the two kids, and they left and they went to meet Tariq. So, just to start another life and all of that. And and they left, and Mariam was there. Mariam was left with taking the blame of all of the whole thing, and eventually being killed by the Taliban. And I loved this so much, that while she was being taken to the place of execution, while they were taking her to execute her, you would have thought that she would go there with tears. She would go there rather in tears and in agony. But she left. She left the world, or she went to to the place of execution. I didn't even know how to say it to be poetic, but being heroic, being brave and courageous. Being brave and courageous. It's such an irony that the way her mother died and the way she died, being hung, was she hung or stoned to death? It was so ironical between the way she left, the way she died and the way her mother died. But I love that at the end, she became a brave woman, a courageous woman, became a mother to Leila, a mother and a grandmother to Aziza, and she took up all of those things. And to be honest, that's the best ending that she could have given her. It was a bittersweet one, because there was no way they could have escaped that. And if they had tried to escape, they might not have been able to. But having one, that's why, there are times they'll say that sacrificing one person, just, for the sake of others, as much as it would have been more noble for all of them to escape, to have had another life, have a better life, that wasn't or couldn't have been possible. And I loved how brave that she was at that moment. Her bravery, her heroic act, her courage, her rebellion overshadowed all, in fact, overshadowed for me, e overshadowed all the acts of, bravery that Leila might have had. He over you he over just overshadowed it, because that was what was needed at that point. That was what was needed at that point. And it was she opened a pathway for a better life, another life, for a life that was better than the one they were used to, for Leila and the kids. And one of those, there were two quotes that, that resonated with me the most, was the part when Miriam told as Leila to tell Aziza that she is the Noor of my eyes and the Sultan of my heart. I will never forget that quote. It stays with me even till tomorrow. Even till tomorrow. Even till tomorrow. So there is a lot of story, or should I say there is a lot, yeah, there is a lot of stories, sub themes that we could explore from this book. And I feel like, if you know if one should, if I should, or we should, or I should, if I should, go through each and every story, or each and every part of the story that happened, or that was written, this place, someone will not leave this place today. It's just going to go on. And this book is a book of survival, hope, betrayal, love, grief, a lot, what have you, a lot of emotions come into play. Sometimes I wonder how even the writer, how Khalid bounces back to reality after he writes such bittersweet stories like this. So for me, in conclusion, just concluding it, it's a bittersweet ending, but it gives a story, it gives an end, it's a bittersweet ending, but it gives us with hope, a bittersweet ending with hope. Hope that Layla and Tariq became reconciled, and later down in the story, when when USA, when America came into play, and they were able to overshadow, should I call it overshadow, or rather push to the background the Taliban rule. on and on and on. So it gave us hope. Just as bittersweet as the ending might be, it also gives hope. In all, we see how war shaping people's lives, we see grief, we see loneliness, we see different horrors, especially women, what they go through in in third world countries, or countries with extremism, where extremism is in play. But through all of it, we see that how people endure, how people love, how people transcend, not just not just in powerful ways, but in quiet ways as well. And above all, how come what may, at the end of it all, sometimes, even in the rumble of war, in the most war torn seasons, there is still hope. There is still a chance of hope, to hope for something good. And I think that was what, because Miriam's death was enough to just wreck a lot of us, a lot of readers, to wreck, to cause us such agony over the book. But after that, you could see how it gave us not just a bitter, but at the end, a sweet ending, that even in spite of it all, there is hope. Come what may, come the most darkest season, come the most season with the most war torn experiences, there is still there is hope. In as much as you are alive, in as much as you are still breathing, in as much as you are still living, in as much as you are still breathing, there is always a chance, that a ray of hope, that things can get better. Maybe not as better as it used to be, but things can look up. God can come through. And I think that that relates to our just our normal life, that we go through the most, sometimes you go through the worst of the worst issues. You could lose the most important people in your life, or the people that support you the most. You could fail some life changing opportunities. You could fail, you could fall over and over again. A lot of things can happen in the course of your life at different times and at different seasons. But above all, there's a need to hope. In fact, I feel like it is necessary not to lose hope. You could fail at strength, you could end up depressed, a lot of things could happen. Human right human responses to those emotions. You could be anxious, you could find yourself being teary, you could be sad, you could be depressed. All of those things, they're actually the right human responses to tough or sad or bad situations. But above all, there is always hope. There is need to have hope, not to lose hope in all of those things. And who what's to say it can't get better? What's to say it can't get better? What's to say things can't look up? What's to say you won't find someone better? What's to say you won't find even better opportunities than the ones you've lost? What's to say you won't find yourself in better situations or environments? What's to say you won't find yourself amidst better loving people that love and want the best for you than the ones that you thought you've lost? So in all of it all, in all of the talking, I really holding everyone's hands, even though not physically. And I wish and I pray that in all of our situation, we never lost our ability to hope for good things, for better things, for better situations than the one we have. Because the moment and the days, or the time, moment or the days, or the moment, the seasons that we lose or lost our hope, I believe we really stop. Then that's when, in a way, we are dead, or we stop living. We stop living. So before we sign out or we draw the curtains, I want to add, one, two lines, or rather, should I call them quotes, that I loved most, aside from the one I mentioned earlier, where Miriam told Laila to tell Aziza that she is the Nur of her eyes and the Sultan of her heart. This one, I think, Khalid just decided to, subtly add it rather to the book, to the story, but it was from a 17th century poem by Saib Tabrizi. I'm sure I butchered it a little bit, but it's just, it's poetic, it's powerful, and it was just a, should I say, call it a dirge or in appreciation to Kabul. It says, one could not count the moons that shimmer on a roof, or the thousand splendid suns that hide behind a wall. This, it just captures the soul, you know, of the city of Kabul, though it was full of beauty, memory, and strength, even though, wrecked by wars. And I think that transcends to us as as beings, just as human beings, in our day to day, in our lives. Although, we are torn apart by situations, by seasons, by anything, things that happen in general, but in all, still yet full of beauty, full of memory, strength, and power, and quiet courage and bravery. So I just want to tell everyone that is listening that though one cannot count the moons that shimmer on your roofs, or the splendid suns that hide behind your walls, even in spite of all that you might be going through, of all that you might have gone through, of all might be going on in your life, or the seasons that you might currently be in. I'm just Koreans will say Imne, just keep at it, and do not at any point ever lose your hope. Just keep at it. Be hopeful at all times, and who knows, things might start looking better, things might look better, situations might change, you might come into better position, better opportunities, better environment, better space, and you know and never ever just forget your place in God, and just keep and hold on tight to your hope and your faith. It's there. We all need it. We all need it in times where we are struggling. So yeah, enough for the aspire to and aspire and aspire to Maguire. This seems quite long, and I'm sorry it's quite long. Even with how long it is, I still felt like I didn't cover all the things I thought I wanted to cover. But in all, A Thousand Splendid Suns is a book that I would recommend for anybody, everybody, anyone who, in fact, you don't even need to love reading, but I would recommend it. It's a good read, to be honest. It really is. It really is. Khalid is a very brilliant author and a writer. All of his books, every one of his books, they really hit home. So yeah, I've taken so much of our time. So join the curtains, and thank you for riding with me. Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much. And yeah, I think I'm getting it right. I will see. No, you will hear from me. I keep making that mistake, but yeah, you guys will hear from me. So bye.